How's it going, guys? And I'm here with a review of Slipknot's The End So Far. So, this is an album that shockingly was released 3 years after the last Slipknot album. And that's like one of the shortest gaps that we've had in quite some time, a really long time, in fact. They haven't had that short of a gap since the self titled to Iowa. And it was really surprising. No one really expected them to bring out an album that fast. But we saw singles had been released since last year, and it did take a while to get to this point. But sure enough, we're finally here and we have the finished album. So, what do we have? Well, I like the album. Of course, I gave it a second listen before giving this review, and I I think that it's a good album. Look, it's definitely good, but the thing what I always struggle is it like a really good Slipknot album. Does it really rank up there with my favorites? And if you want to know which ones are my favorites, believe it or not, it might shock you. Volume 3, The Subliminal Verses, and Point 5, The Grade Chapter. After going through and re-listening to these albums again before the release of this one, because I was anticipating this one for September 30th, I did give a listen to all their past albums. I actually didn't re-listen to the self-titled for some reason. I just didn't have enough time before I got the idea to kind of do another discography listen through. So the one that really stuck out to me is like really kind of felt that I think I reviewed it and said that I liked it because it was different was We Are Not Your Kind. I'm not the biggest fan of that album looking back. There's a few tracks that I like, but overall it kind of feels like the black sheep of the Slipknot family to me. And I don't think I really need to go back and listen to the self-title. I am going to now after listening to The End So Far. But I have to say that We're Not Your Kind, it's not really my kind of Slipknot album. So I think I could say right from the offset. See, this is the problem, the newness factor. I'm going to say that right now, doing this video on October 2nd, that The End So Far is better than We Are Not Your Kind. But then again, like I said I liked that album the first time I listened to it because there's something about newness. There's something about it. It's bright and shiny, and we're more inclined to like it. We want to like it, especially if it's by a band that I truly like Slipknot. Something that I've listened since adolescence to. So you're going to be more inclined to want to like something and to know if it's like truly great, if you really do like it like objectively, or if you're just kind of fooling your mind into thinking that you like it. So yeah, at this present moment, I do think it is a superior album. And there was even times when All Hope Is Gone was not really an album that I was enjoying fully. Like, there were songs that I always liked, like Dead Memories and Psychosocial. But a big portion of the album I wasn't really enjoying as a whole compared to the other three that came before it. But now it's kind of sitting almost in the same spot. And perhaps I will rank these albums in the future. But those are always going to be my top albums right there. It's always going to be Volume 3 and Point 5. I just think that they have the right number of variety amongst the tracks, going from heavy to lighter sounding songs that are more melodic. Always when there's a lighter song, people always accuse it of being stone sour. Now I have to say, I don't have a lot of stone sour experience up until about a few weeks ago when I actually started listening to Stone Sour, I'd listened to them in the past, but it was like something I brushed aside. I was like, oh, if I'm going to listen to Corey Taylor, I'd rather listen to him in Slipknot. But I realized that, man, I had really been missing out, especially kind of surprising myself that Jim Root being one of my favorite guitarists, that why wouldn't I want to go and listen to those earlier Stone Sour albums and hear more guitar work from Jim Root? And it's a real shame that he's not with the band anymore, but I have to go and listen to those newer albums that he's not on. Perhaps they're superior. Like I said, it's very important that we give everything a chance. And I don't really think that there's any problem with a little bit of Stone Sour being injected into Slipknot. Slipknot hasn't been what a lot of fans think it's supposed to be. A lot of fans still think that the way Iowa sounds is the way that they're supposed to sound. I think they sort of established that on Volume 3. And it's been a while since Volume 3. It's been since 2004, mind you. That we have had this reestablishment of what Slipknot is supposed to be. So that's a pretty long time there, fellas. We're almost talking about 2 decades. And if you're still thinking that, Iowa is the way how Slipknot's supposed to be, that's supposed to be their bread and butter, you're dead wrong. Because a great argument can be made that Slipknot didn't really fully come into their own until they made Volume 3. And that's kind of how I see it. I do actually think that is an album where they found themselves. And that's kind of weird to say because, I've been listening to them since the year 2000, which was about a year or so after they actually debuted. When my cousin let me listen to them for the first time, listening to their album when Purity still was a banned track that they weren't allowed and they had to re-release the album. You remember the old album art that didn't even have Slipknot written on the album, which was like super weird to me. That always felt like really odd why they chose not to have their logo front and center, but when they re-released it, it was there. And, I knew from that also like a band track, like there was something interesting about this band right off, right off the bat. So, all right. So, that's enough introspective talking about Slipknot. So, like, how does this album really stack up? Like, what's good about it? So, okay, right from the offset, I think I even said this about We Are Not Your Kind. Adderall is not really the best opening track. I think really the best opening track that we've had, like, meaning like track 1, mind you, like an intro track. I think really the best one that they've had was on Point 5, the Grade Chapter. I think that was a really stunning track that really put you in the mood. And I'm actually going to look at the name of it. And it was 19 in Roman numerals. I'm pretty sure that's how that's said. But to me, that really captured in 3 minutes, like, the tone of this album. Like, you're going to be in for something different. There's going to be some variety on this album. I think that is the way a Slipknot album should start off, where it doesn't really sound like a song, if that makes any sense, where it really does sound like an intro. Now, I think a lot of people argue that, on the self-titled, like, that came like with a really weird intro that you probably would not expect to hear really on any album, and it grabs you. Like, those are good grabbing tracks, but I do like this implementation of, they started doing this with Volume 3. Give a track that kind of sounds a little weird, but it still is sort of a song, but not quite like the other songs that are on the album that feel like more full-fledged, where it does feel like an intro track. So Adderall just feels, very long at 5 minutes, and it's not like the most satisfying intro track, to be quite honest. I don't think it's really that grabbing. It sounds different. The vocals are more distorted, which is pretty, synonymous with an opening track. That is a good point to make there. That Slipknot opening tracks are more distorted. Like I said, they're weird. They don't really feel like full-fledged songs, and they're not really supposed to be. So it does get it right in that department. But I think, like, is it being satisfying? I do think it kind of falls a little flat, at least right now anyway. Who knows, another year or two, I might be saying it's brilliant. So that's why these things kind of remain to be seen. The Dying Song, Time to Sing, they always manage to get a good, second track. Like after an intro, they always come in with a hard hitting song. And, these songs, like looking at them right now, they're all really good, from the Dying Song to the Chapel Town Rag to Yen. They actually really lined up a lot of these singles here, I noticed, which is a little bit odd, like one right after the other. Like kind of not even separating them or like moving them around the track, or it's like, well, here's all our singles, we're banging them out right one after another. Hive Mind, another really good song that I enjoy. Now like kind of looking at this track list, I can't even really remember like how Warranty or Medicine for the Dead particularly sound. Heirloom is a good track. One of my favorites, really, one of the more unique tracks on here, H377. That is a real interesting vocal performance from Corey Taylor. Kind of like Custer in a way, where it's just a little bit different. It feels sort of more like an anthem song of sorts, but not quite. Kind of hard to describe, and I kind of like songs like that where they're kind of hard to describe, and this is definitely a song that's definitely in the realm of being a little bit more hard to describe. It's kind of hard to put into words exactly what it sounds like until you listen to it, but Corey's vocals are definitely more different than they have sounded on any other Slipknot track for that matter, which calls attention to it, which makes it one of my favorites. The finale is really that is a good way to round things out. They've been doing really good with closing tracks. The one thing that really bites me, as much as everyone says that Iowa's a classic album, the fact that it ends with a 15-minute track is a little bit ludicrous. I kind of understand what they were going for there. It's not really one of my favorite closers. It's something that's kind of a little bit of a chore to listen to. I don't know if you guys get this thing, you kind of feel like you need to listen through an album the full way through, but after a while with Iowa's closing track, it always feels like a chore kind of listening to it. It's not really a bad way of closing out what's kind of a spooky album by them, but when you got tracks Finale, this definitely is a way better than what we used to get, back in the day from them. So how do I feel about this album altogether? Now we've had a little time to discuss it. I'm a bit confused by it because there's so much difference between a lot of the Slipknot albums. There's more difference than you would probably believe, thinking back on in retrospect. I don't know. I think a lot of people just tend to say Slipknot's just a heavy band and kind of just stop there, and they don't put a lot of nuance into it. Each album has a little bit something different that makes it special. I'm how can I really lay it out for you? Self-Titled felt very experimental. There was definitely more hip-hop elements going on there. When you think about Spit It Out and Wait It Bleed, I don't really get a lot of songs that really sound like that anymore. We have gotten songs that sounded like Sick. We definitely have gotten tracks like that. Especially on Iowa. They followed up on tracks like Sick and kind of brought them more to the forefront, getting Disaster Piece. But we did see little things like My Plague and little bits of the chorus and Left Behind where we could have a bit more of a sing-songy chorus. And that was definitely, furthered upon in Volume 3. Carrying on with All Hope Is Gone, where kind of felt like All Hope Is Gone tried to be a little bit more Iowa-ish in a sense, but still retaining what they had learned from their, music writing on Volume 3. And Point 5, the Great Chapter, I think is like they kind of just took Volume 3 and kind of implemented elements from all the other albums and kind of threw them all, into a pot and mixed them together and came up what I think is a pretty masterful album. I do think Point 5 is maybe just as good as Volume 3, but, and keep in mind, like, I think that this opinion is pretty controversial because it seems like most fans that are like from my generation tend to really always say Iowa for some reason. But I don't know if that's like rose-colored glasses and, like when's the last time you truthfully went back and listened to Iowa, comparing it to the other albums? We're Not Your Kind. That was something where they really just kind of wanted to go in another direction. It was kind of like from Iowa, the Volume 3, where Corey was like, once again, let's do something a little different here. And then, we come to the end so far. And it's really interesting kind of going, into the history of this album because just a few days ago, we had an interview with Jim Root where he said that he wasn't really satisfied with this album. And I was like, oh shit, that's not really a winning endorsement for this album. You definitely don't want to hear that going into it. Like, say, like, oh man, like this album's not that good, so why should I even bother listening to it? And this is, Jim Root basically said this about Stone Sour, why he left the group. I was doing a little bit of research, said he wasn't really too happy about the way Stone Sour was sounding, said it sounded a little too commercial for his taste, so he packed his bags and, he left Stone Sour, still stayed in Slipknot. But it's interesting, he said because of the pandemic, they weren't able to really get all of their get mostly like his input as much as he wanted to. So there is something a little bit behind this album. It seems like Jim Root didn't really get all his ideas in there that he wanted to. It's, like everything, it's never quite clear. This is what I always hate. It's never like crystal clear all the time. Like exactly what does he mean by that? Is it like the number of ideas he had didn't get to go into it? Or the ideas that he had were kind of lost in translation during the production and the making of this album? Could be a combination of both, perhaps. But, yeah, as I look at it, I have to say, like, I like this album. I think you should listen to it. If you're a Slipknot fan, you're obviously probably have already listened to it. But where it ranks, this is what's so interesting. Always, talking about how albums rank in a discography amongst the bands is always fascinating because everyone's going to have different tastes, especially when you have a band like Slipknot that is so diverse. It's kind of like almost like I would say like Korn, or even if we want to go a little bit further than that, like In Flames, where fans are all over the place with opinions on, all the different styles that like a band like In Flames has implemented over what's been a pretty lengthy career. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments down below. Did you listen to the album? If you did you enjoy it, or are you going to give it a listen to see what it's all about? And I want to thank all my patrons for your continued support. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up. If you fucking hated it, hit the thumbs down. And thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.